What is going on, guys? In today's video I will show you the top 3 best Stormweaver builds in Path of Exile 2 0.3 update. So in this guide I will give you a quick overview of each setup, then I will explain what skill gems and upgrades should you focus on. Then as well we'll see what is the best gear and how to get it. And then finally we will go over the passive skill tree, the stats, skill rotations, and even what Atlas passive should you use, so we would be able to get the highest damage possible and much more. And remember, if you want to try any of these builds out, then check my links in the description. And before we continue, thanks to U4GM. They are a pro website that provides POE2 services like cheap currency, then even to trade all types of quality items and gems and much more. They have also more than 20,000 positive comments on Trustpilot, and this website is really worth a try. So make sure to use my discount code KATE for extra 6% off. The setup takes the full advantage of the brand new infusion mechanics by letting us unload insane amount of burst AoE damage while still maintaining off-screen clear speed that feels borderline unfair. This build feels smooth early on, scales like crazy later, and has a god mode energy when it really comes fully online. This is not just your average lightning caster, this is the mana stacking Arc Stormweaver, which is a build that completely rewrites how you think about resources. Instead of mana just being a bar you deplete when casting skills, it becomes the core stat that fuels everything, so offense, defense, sustain. All of these will tie back to one thing, the maximum mana. The more mana you stack, the more devastating Arc becomes, because the harder you shock enemies, the more effective your defenses become. By combining Stormweaver's lightning ascendancy tools with the Archmage scaling and intelligence gearing, this build transforms your blue orbs into the single most important stat in the game. Its chaining clears trash mobs like nothing else, and when combined with the Stormweaver bonuses and the mana scaling, its single target absolutely shreds bosses. Every chain, every crit, every shock is powered by investment that we poured into our mana pool, making the skill feel both satisfying and incredibly reliable. And backing up the Arc, we have new infusions. These will let us stack up burst windows where our damage goes into overdrive, and thanks to our mana synergy, we can easily afford it. So let's take a look at our skill gems. At the heart of this build is the Arc. It's our bread and butter, our primary source of clear, and the spell that scales directly with our mana stacking approach. The gem supports here are focused on turning Arc into a powerhouse. So Archmage is mandatory, converting your massive mana pool into the raw damage. Then you want supports like the spell Echo for the rapid double casting, increased critical damage, and the chance for scaling shock multipliers. When you're hitting with the Arc under a full set of infusions, it feels like chaining lightning storms across the entire screen. Next is the Orb of Storms, and this is more just a utility button. Orb of Storms will apply consistent shocks and the exposures by setting up enemies that take increased damage, but the real synergy here comes from combining it with infusions, so casting Orb of Storms essentially will prime your rotation, letting you build those infusion stacks that supercharge your Arc spam. You just need to place it down before every big fight and watch it boost your damage. Then next we got Mana Tempest, which is a crucial sustain skill. This one keeps your resources topped off and ensures that even in extended fights, you never feel starved for the mana. It creates those burst windows where you can spam Arc relentlessly without worrying. You'll learn to time it with your Orb of Storms and the Sigil of Power for the maximum effect. Speaking of which, the Sigil of Power is another gem that fits seamlessly into this build. It gives you an area of strength to fight inside, both by increasing your lightning damage and providing a layer of protection against heavy hits. You can drop it for the bosses or dangerous rares, and it turns those fights into controlled battlegrounds, where you're the one dictating the pace. Now let's talk about the passive tree. The essential psychology here is simple. Stack as much mana as possible, and then let every part of the build flow from that. Nodes that increase maximum mana, both flat and percentage based, are your top priority. Intelligence nodes are also highly valuable, as they boost mana while helping to meet the gem requirements. Once foundation is in place, you can branch into spell damage, lightning penetration, and the shock effect nodes. These will ensure that the Arc feels deadly in both mapping and bossing. Shock effect in particular is critical because the Stormweaver's ascendancy passives will reward you heavily for applying and scaling shock. The more consistently and powerfully you can shock, the more everything else will snowball. Cast speed is another core investment, because you're spamming Arc continuously. More cast speed not only makes the build smoother, but also increases the EPS by letting you fit more casts into each infusion windows. Then on defensive side, the tree grabs key nodes for the Mind over Matter and the Eldritch Battery. By converting mana into effect effective mitigation. Life and energy shield clusters are also picked up with efficiency, but our true defense comes from regeneration and recovery scaling. Mana recovery nodes ensure that even after big hits or heavy casting, your resource pool will snap back instantly, letting you keep casting and surviving. Then for cluster jewels and extensions, you want to look for curse effectiveness, lightning area of effect and mana recovery bonuses. These reinforce both the offense and sustain, keeping your build running at a peak power during extended fights. Now let's move into the gear. The number one rule is to stack mana everywhere where you can. Every piece of gear is an opportunity to push your pull higher, and every roll of flat or percentage increased mana will directly scale your damage and survivability. For your helmet, the best in slot is the Aviana Tiara, ideally rolled with high flat mana, intelligence and resistances. Then for your offhand, the Sacred Focus is incredible, by amplifying the spell damage while also giving you room to scale mana-based defenses. Then for gloves, go with the Maligori's Virtuosity. The crit scaling here is huge, and it ties perfectly into the build shock mechanics. Then for boots we should get the Bangle Sandals, again to prioritize mana, movement speed and resistances. Then your body armor is the Altar Robe, which is chosen for its mana scaling potential and defensive flexibility. The belt is also absolutely non-negotiable, which is the Darkness Enthroned. Into this, you also want to socket the Tain Granel's Rune of Mastery, or increased shock magnitude. This interaction is one of the biggest power spikes in the build, and you will feel the difference immediately. Make sure that your version of the belt also allows glove sockets so you can maximize customization. Then for rings, we want one with a Topaz ring and one with a Ruby ring, each one rolled with a flat mana, resistances and ideally intelligence. These will cover your defenses while scaling damage. And then finally for the amulet, we have the Lunar Amulet. Here you want +1 to all lightning or spell gems, alongside flat mana, intelligence and the maximum life. Then anointing this with a shock related passives or the lightning damage is a cherry on top. Overall, yes, the gearing path is demanding, but every upgrade feels monumental. By the time that you're stacking multiple high mana rolls across your gear, the damage and sustain will be to insane levels. And now finally, let's see how to actually play this build. From Act 3 and onwards, once you pick up the Mana Tempest, you will feel the core loop come online. The rotation for the bosses is straightforward but immensely satisfying. So you drop the Sigil of Power to set up your arena, then apply elemental weaknesses for the cursed multipliers. Then cast Orb of Storms twice to stack your infusions, then pop the Mana Tempest to flood your mana recovery, and then unleash the Arc Spam until infusions expire. Then rinse and repeat and watch the bosses melt under consistent shock chains. Then for general mapping it's even simpler. Just pop the Mana Tempest, cast arcs, and let the chains do all the work. Most monsters won't even reach you before the lightning erases them. In denser content like the Legion or Delirium, you'll find the more monsters they are, the faster they vanish. It's that kind of a scaling that feels more OP the bigger the fight gets. And then defensively, we are constantly covered by the mana pool acting as a shield. Convalescence will give us sustain, while Eldritch Battery and Mind over Matter mean that you always have casting power even if you take a bit of a hit. Keep the Orb of Storms rolling for the shock and infusions, and your survivability will feel much better than a traditional sorceress build. This build takes the full advantage of the brand new elemental infusion system, which fundamentally changes how elemental casters will scale their damage. Instead of committing to just fire, cold or lightning, this character will combine all of these together by creating such a big offense that not only clears maps quickly, but also melts bosses when all the effects are stacked. In the early campaign, the sorceress feels fairly standard. You'll be tossing out spells like the Spark, Firebolt and the Freezing Shards as your bread and butter, but the real magic happens once you hit Act 3 and unlock the elemental infusions. At that point, the build transforms into something entirely new. Every cast will feel multiple elemental states, so set the enemies with the fire, freezing them with a solid cold, and shocking them with the lightning all at once. It's a level of synergy that feels almost unfair. The design psychology behind this build is also important. I've created it with a solo self-found in mind, meaning that you don't need to rely on trading or chasing after specific uniques to succeed. That makes it perfect as a league starter or for anyone who doesn't want to stress about the prices focus and the gear availability. So offensively, we focus on stacking spell levels, the cast speed and penetration nodes, so that your spells always feel OP. The overlapping shocks, freezing and ignites just don't increase your DPS, they will give you incredible control over the fights. The build is fast, flexible and incredibly satisfying to play. So let's take a look at the skill gems, which is the heart of any build. The early game is all about practicality and the ease of use, while the mid to the late game transitions into a synergetic infusion-driven setup. At the very start you will be working with the Spark, Firebolt and the Freezing Shards. The Spark is great for AoE clearing because of the random projectile behavior, while the Firebolt provides strong single target pressure, especially on the early bosses. Freezing Shards is deceptively strong because its shotgun hits enemies at a close range, while also providing reliable freezing utility. As soon as you reach Act 3, the real power spike comes from the introduction of the Siphon elements. This gem is the centerpiece of the build. It's what allows you to sustain infusion and stack overlapping elemental buffs. From here, the gameplay loop becomes less about spamming one spell and more about rotating through the different elements to maximize the infusion system. Early on, you want to focus on the added elemental damage, faster casting and control destruction. As your gear and levels improve, you will transition into the elemental focus, increased critical damage and the spell echo for the explosive scaling. Then priority should always be on the cast speed and the damage multipliers, as they make the gameplay feel much smoother while also boosting the raw numbers. When it comes to the gem upgrades, you want to prioritize quality on your most important skills, so the Siphon elements being the highest priority, followed by your core damage dealers like the Fireball and the Orb of Storms. Then next, the passive tree is what turns the build from a decent campaign caster into a late game powerhouse. Starting near the beginning, you immediately pick up the spell damage, mana regeneration and intelligence nodes to create a solid foundation. These nodes will keep you casting smooth and efficient, which makes you sure you never feel like you're running out of resources mid-fight. Then from there, the tree branches outwards into the elemental clusters. The beauty of this build is that it doesn't pigeonhole itself into one element. You are deliberately spreading your investments across fire, cold and the lightning nodes. The fire clusters will enhance your ignite and the raw damage scaling. Then cold clusters will empower your freeze chance and the crit potential, while the lightning clusters will focus on the shock effectiveness and the critical strikes. Together, these investments will ensure that no matter what you're casting, it always feels OP. Another big focus is on penetration. Enemies scale resistances heavily as you progress, and without penetration, your spell starts to fall off. By grabbing elemental penetration nodes across the tree, you will ensure that damage stays relevant against even the tankiest bosses. Defensively, the hydration is also the key, so energy shield clusters combined with the life nodes will give you a dual layer defenses. This lets you absorb huge spikes of damage without instantly dying, while your regeneration and the shield charge sustain you through the prolonged encounters. Mana sustain also becomes vital, so you'll be picking up nodes that increase mana efficiency and the regeneration, which allows you to keep spamming spells without interruptions. And then finally, the crit padding ties everything together. The spell critical hit chance and the multiplier nodes give the sorceress a burst potential by turning the standard casts into a massive nukes. Next up we have gear, which is always a huge part of any build. So let's break down what you need here. During the campaign, you want to prioritize movement speed above all else. Boots with the movement speed will completely change how the build feels, letting you dodge mechanics and move efficiently through the acts. After that, focus on the life, energy shield and resistances. These stats will keep you alive through the early difficulties, while still letting you to dish out damage. Weapon-wise, the staffs are the best starting option. They naturally roll with the largest stat bonuses, which makes it easier to find strong versions early on. But then later, you want to transition into a wand and a shield setup, or a mix of offense and defense. The shields provide an extra energy shield, resistances and sometimes even block, which is super valuable against tougher bosses. Then for stat priorities, intelligence is your main attribute, but don't neglect the strength and dexterity requirements for the certain gems. Then on gear, your priority should be first the movement speed, then maximum life, then mana regeneration, then cast speed, then plus levels to elemental skills, and then any type of resistance. Energy shield scaling should always be secondary, but still relevant. By combining life with the ES, you will get a durable hybrid defense that feels safe in both campaign and maps. Unique items are not required for this build, but if you happen to find early game uniques like the movement speed boots with the energy shield bonuses, or even a wand with the extra spell damage and the chaos resistance, then they can make your leveling much smoother. And remember, the entire design of this build is for solo self-found, so everything you need can be obtained through the normal progression. And now finally, let's see how do you actually play this build. Early on, you wanna rotate between the Spark for AoV and the Firebolt for single target damage. Freezing Shards is a great third option if you pick up a cold base staff, as it gives a great freeze up time. Then combine these with the Frost Bomb for the AoV nukes and the Flame Wall for projectile damage boosts. By Act 3, once infusions come online, then the build's gameplay loop changes. You will rotate between the spells of different elements to maintain multiple infusions simultaneously. For example, you wanna cast the Orb of Storms near the enemies to generate the lightning infusions, then drop a Flame Wall for the fire infusions, and then follow that up with the cold spells like the Frost Bomb to trigger the freezing. This rotation ensures that you're stacking all 3 elemental buffs by maximizing both the damage and crowd control. Then in the maps, the Sorceress shine with mobility and stacking damage. You'll dart around the packs, setting up infusions, and watching as entire groups of enemies get deleted in overlapping effects. Against bosses, you control the fight by freezing them in a place, while stacking ignites and shocks for massive sustained DPS. The defensive gameplay revolves around keeping your energy shield topped off, then maintaining resistances and dodging big telegraph hits with the movement speed. Overall, this build is fluid, responsive, and incredibly high DPS. This is a build designed to take you through the hardest content with a single ability at its core. Everything revolves around Spark, which is a spell that fills the battlefield with dozens of projectiles that ricochet, bounce, and zap their way through the enemies, until nothing is left standing. With this setup, the Spark is pushed to its absolute limit, and the result is a widescreen lightning storm that leaves no survivors. What makes the build special is how it combines the Spark with the Blood Mage archetype. Instead of worrying about the mana or juggling awkward resource management, every cast is paid for directly with the life. On paper, that might sound risky, but with the right passive tree choices, gear, and the flask setup, it actually feels incredibly smooth. You are draining your HP constantly, but also replenishing it instantly through the regeneration and the natural sustain provided by the Blood Mage mechanics. This means that you can cast endlessly without running dry, and it creates a unique rhythm where your survival and the offense is intertwined. This build achieves a 100% critical strike chance for all the spells, which means that every spark projectile, every orb, and every supportive proc is guaranteed to crit. So let's take a look at the skill gems, and at the heart of this build is the Spark. This is the ability that does almost all the work. You'll want the Spark linked to the Pierce, rapid casting, prolonged duration, and the pinpoint critical. This combination ensures that every spark projectile will travel farther, last longer, and hit harder. The Pierce allows them to shred through the packs of monsters without stopping. Then rapid casting speeds up your firing rate to fill the screen faster. Prolonged duration will ensure that Spark stays active longer to bounce more times. And pinpoint critical pushes the critical chance into overdrive by multiplying effectiveness of every single hit. Then supporting this is the Orb of Storms, which you suck it in your second weapon set. This is linked with the Overabundance. Consider casting an Arcane Surge. The Orb of Storms is more than just a utility skill. It acts as an additional source of damage, while also triggering the critical strikes and keeping your buffs active. Whenever you drop an orb into the pack, it chains and shocks enemies, while also recharging your Arcane Surge for increased damage and the cast speed. Then the third major offensive skill is the Power Siphon, linked with the cast on critical strike and the arc. This allows your Spark crits to trigger additional lightning spells, or even more screen coverage. With the supports like the Boundless Energy, Energy Retention, and the Life Tap, this setup sustains itself and turns every crit into a cascade of the extra spells. For debuffs and support, you run the Sigil of Power, which both empowers your damage and weakens the enemies inside its radius. The Sigil is linked with the Elemental Weakness, Prolonged Duration, and the Heightened Curse effect, by turning it into a massive damage amplifier. You also bring Firestorm for the wide AoV destruction, paired with the Rapid Casting, Prolonged Duration, and the Elemental Focus. And finally, the last important thing is the Frost Bomb, which is used as utility tool to reduce the enemy resistances, and it is also linked with the Potent Exposure, Remnant Potency, and the Heightened Curse effect. Next up, the passive tree is specifically designed to maximize the consistent critical strike potential, while also sustaining life cost of the blood magic. You begin prioritizing nodes that grant critical strike chance, critical strike multiplier, and the spell damage. Notables like the Raw Destruction, Practice Signs, Critical Overload, and the Sudden Escalation, Evocated Efficiency, and the Critical Exploit are all part of the early build. Each one pushes your crit chance higher, then scale the multipliers that turn those crits into devastating hits, or even reduce the cost and increase the efficiency of your casting. From there, the path continues into the larger crit clusters, like the potent incantation, efficiency killing, and the ship defenses, before reaching the true strike and for the juggler. These synergizes perfectly with the Spark's rapid fire playstyle, by ensuring that not only you can crit all the time, but also that those crits will shred through the enemy defenses. Then the mental autocrity and the electric amplification are picked up along the way by boosting the cast speed and the lightning damage. A key aspect of the tree is the blood magic keystone. By converting all mana cast into life, you will eliminate the need for the mana entirely. Instead of every cast draining the life directly, the passive tree will balance that with the large investments into the maximum life and regeneration. The padding also secures plenty of the raw life, percentage increase and regeneration, making it possible to sustain the spark spam infinitely as long as you have a strong flask and recovery. Then projectile speed and duration scaling also play an important role, because spark is at its strongest when projectiles travel further and last longer. Then next up we have the gear, and the setup for the Spark Blood Mage build will emphasize for both the offensive scaling and the sustain, which is needed to survive when you're losing constantly life. The weapon of our choice is a wand, as they will naturally boost spell casting and can roll critical strike chance for the spells, global crit multipliers, and even the cast speed. Ideally, you want a wand with a very high base spell crit chance, plus the mods that increase multipliers and the spell damage. The cast speed is also very crucial, as it multiplies the effectiveness of the spark by letting you fill the screen faster. Then your offhand can be either by a shield or a second wand. If you want to go with a shield, then prioritize life resistances and the spell crit bonuses. A high-end rare shield with these stats will provide the best mix of offense and defenses. Then for your armor pieces, like the helmet, chest, gloves and the boots, you want maximum life and resistance first, and then look for the spell damage, lightning damage or the cast speed as a secondary bonus. Because this is a blood mage build, so any gear that provides life regeneration or the life gain on a cast is especially valuable, as it directly offsets the cost of your casting. Then the jewelry is where you push the build's damage ceiling to the roof. Amulets, rings and the belts can all roll global critical strike multipliers. The amulet slot is particularly important, because this is where you equip the Chore of the Storm, which synergizes perfectly with our crit scaling, and adds a consistent rain of lightning bolts as you cast. Rings can fill in resistances while also offering a crit and lightning damage. Then the belt should reinforce survivability, ideally with a heavy life roll and a flask modifiers that make your sustain loop even smoother. And now finally, let's see how to actually play this build. In practice, it feels like unleashing a thunderstorm every time you hit your cast key. Your default mode is to spam the spark continuously, by filling the screen with projectiles that pierce and bounce endlessly. With the prolonged duration and the pierce, sparks will zip around the battlefield longer than you've cast them, by ensuring that every enemy is eventually struck. And because you're crit capped, each hit is devastating. And with the cast on crit setups, every crit also triggers additional spells like Arc that multiplies your damage even further. Then for general mapping, the flow is simple. You enter a pack, then drop the Orb of Storms and then start casting sparks. Orbs will keep you buffed rolling, while the sparks clears everything, and then the Sigil of Power can be dropped for the tougher rares or the clusters. Then Firestorm and the Frostbomb are used for the supplemental tools, either way for the weak bosses with resistances, or to cover the wide areas in additional AoE damage. Most of the time you don't even need them, as the spark alone is more than enough to delete entire screens. And then against bosses, the rotation is a bit more different, but it's still straightforward. So this time you want to drop the Sigil of the Power first, then apply the Frost Bomb for exposure, and then channel Spark, while the Orb of Storms will keep the Arcane Surge active. Overall, this combination of the curses, debuffs, and the crit scaling sparks will all melt bosses in split seconds,